Hey, real quick, everybody, want to give a shout to our friends over at betonline.ag. I know the NFL's over, the Super Bowl's done. We got Major League Baseball, NHL, March Madness coming around the corner, which to me is the greatest postseason sporting event of all time and what I like to wager on the most. So head over to betonline.ag as soon as you can. Tell them Jboy sent you, whether it's prop bets, whether it's parlays, whether you want to go straight up, or whether you're into teasers, pleasers, whatever you like to do. They have it over there, and the online casino is open 24 hours a day. There's always something going down at betonline.ag. So check our friends out over there and tell them Jboy sent you.
You are listening to the Jboy Show, your number one source for Auburn and the SEC.
My goal was to run through his soul and grab his heart when I run through his soul.
Kurt, Nate, Coach Staff, those are memories.
I think we've established ourselves as, I think, the premier conference in college football.
Now, the SEC is better at the top. It's better in the middle.
The Southeastern Conference remains the premier conference.
Now takes the snap. Looking for the receiver. He's got Lutz and Kirkland. Touchdown, Auburn!
When you think about it, it's always been the SEC and everybody else trying to catch it.
I think this is probably the best league from a competitive venue standpoint.
They have the most capable teams. You just look at those programs, the way they recruit, how they invest.
Snap to Burrow. 3 steps. Fires. Back corner of the end zone. Over the shoulder catch. Did he hold on? He did. Justin Jefferson. Touchdown, Tiger.
And now, your host, Jboy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Jboy Show. Really appreciate you guys joining us, whether you're watching, listening, however, we really appreciate it. Excited to bring on a guy that just took a big job at the Rocky Top Insider. I know you guys, especially Tennessee fans, know about that. Personal friend of mine. I love his work. I love his content. He's always going to tell you what he thinks, good, bad, or indifferent, regardless of who you root for. And that's Mr. Trey Wallace. Trey, what's up, man?
What's up, Jboy? How are you, man? It's good to be on with you.
Man, I'm doing great, and I appreciate you coming on, and hopefully this is one of many times, man, because I do want to pick your brain, obviously, about this Tennessee stuff and some other stuff going on in the conference, and I want to jump right in. Obviously, Tennessee hires Danny White as the AD, which is a guy that's obviously very well thought of, family background, the hires he's made, and he hires Josh Heupel. And number one, I just want your overall thoughts on the hire, and then I want to kind of get into the nitty-gritty and why it worked out the way that it did. So just off the cuff, Josh Heupel, Tennessee, what are your thoughts?
We won't act like it was the first choice. Okay.
Yeah,
but I think that when you break it down, you bring a new athletic director in, somebody that he is comfortable with. And I'm not saying that's why he made the hire. I'm saying it turned out to be the case.
Yeah.
I think Josh Heupel brings a different type of look. It was either go after Elliott, at Clemson, end up with Heupel. Who do you go with? Gus wasn't taking the job in Knoxville. So, your candidate choice got narrowed down a little bit. And I think Josh Heupel is a guy that could come in and use Tennessee's weapons that they have at receiver, at running back. The quarterback situation ended up perfectly because they got Landon Hooker. And then you already have Caden Salter coming in. So I think with Josh Heupel and the type of offense he runs, it was always going to be key to get a defensive coordinator that can keep up in the Southeastern Conference, because we look all around and take, for instance, Ole Miss. They can score a lot of points, but the problem is they give up a lot of points.
Yes.
So that's what they have to switch their model. Tennessee, and what they're going to try to do with Josh Heupel and this offensive staff is they're going to run, and have that QB option out there, run a lot of RPOs. You're going to be able to get outside. I think it fits with Tennessee's offensive line too. But just talking about Heupel in general, he brings new energy to Tennessee. He brings fun to Tennessee. It was very, what's the best way? It was like a military boot camp for the last 3 years for these players. And I think when you bring in somebody that can look at your receiver and be like, okay, we're going to get you involved, and look at your running back and be able to say, okay, look, I know you weren't involved a lot last year, but we have an offense that I think is going to work for you. I think that's key for the players that have stuck around. You haven't seen a lot of offensive players come off the board, going to the portal, besides Eric Gray and maybe Wanye Morris. But when you really break it down, I think it turned out to be a decent hire on paper. Now we just got to see him put it in offense to see what he can do. So I give the hire a B, but now, you got to put in the work.
Exactly. And I do got to ask, because circumstances dictate everything. And you talk about how Heupel wasn't the first choice, and that makes sense. But, when I look and I kind of scour the situation there in Knoxville, with the NCAA stuff, Trey, and I want you to give me an update. You were one of the guys that kind of broke the story, got it out there, a little bit of what's going on. Do you think that had a factor in, and I'm not knocking Josh Heupel, but the reality is reality. And when guys sit down, these coaches want to know, hey, what's going to be the deal? Because you know how it is in the SEC. It's already hard enough, especially with the way Alabama and Georgia are operating right now. Look at what A&M's doing. But it's even harder when you got a hand tied behind your back. So do you think that had an effect?
I think yes. I think when you looked at your pool of candidates and who you're going to go after, I think one of the things that was nervous, new AD, it's always going to be interesting with that. What's life been like at Tennessee for the last 3 to 4 years with the coaches there? That's another factor. You have to remember, all these coaches talk to each other.
Oh, yeah.
All of them.
Oh, yeah.
If they say they don't, they do. Then the NCAA comes into picture. And I think the investigation, which is still ongoing at this moment, they interviewed assistant coaches. The days get lost to me, but the last interview was a week and a half ago. 2 weeks ago, they interviewed some assistant coaches that were on their way out. So I think that had to do with it, because Tennessee, look, they're looking at scholarship reduction. They are looking at postseason ban, which, okay, for Tennessee, they weren't going to go to a national championship next year.
That's true. That's true.
It's like, okay, you're losing out probably on a day in Florida, maybe, or Birmingham. But I think what it's going to do is it potentially the NCAA stuff could hurt them when it comes to money-wise. When it comes to the pool that the SEC gives, when you miss out on certain things, it could take the Tennessee program a step back even further than they already are. So I think the biggest thing too is you got to tell all these guys this, and you got to, when you're sitting down with an interview, and the Parker search firm will go through this and who Tennessee hired, and they'll kind of give a brief synopsis of what's going on. But then you got to bring in Danny White, and you got to bring in Donde Plowman, who's the chancellor, and Randy Boyd, and you got to really explain to these coaches that are interested in the job, this is what's going on. Like, we're looking at some hardcore stuff here. Jeremy Pruitt and that staff did no favors to Tennessee in the football program. So when you really break that down, yes, it shrinks. Your candidate pool shrinks. And that's why I think in the end, it was, Danny White could pick up the phone and call Josh. Josh, look, here's the situation. Yeah. We can get you in the SEC. There's some stuff you're going to have to deal with for the next couple of years, but if you can get through that, you can do something in this conference. And I think that's an opportunity that Heupel couldn't pass up.
Oh, no doubt.
Jboy, I don't see another job in the SEC that can open up in the next 2 to 3 years where he would be able to go off of his last 3 years at UCF.
No, so that's a great point.
Perfect time, perfect opportunity for him to take it.
No, I think that's a great point, man. You encapsulated that perfectly, and it does. It shrinks the pool, and you got to kind of take some chances, maybe get some young guys, but take some guys he's hired on the staff. I'm going to tell you right now, Jerry Mack's a hell of a football coach. I've watched him do it. I was in the field house with him at South Alabama. He was a fast riser, one of the most organized, smartest guys I've been around from a scheme standpoint, and the kids love him.
I love
They want to play for him. He's unbelievable. I know you have a relationship with him too. We kind of got a similar vibe there, but I do want to move on and talk about the offense, and you brought it up because I do think it's such an interesting dynamic. And what I've been saying kind of parlays exactly to what you were saying about that offense. And when you play in conferences, like they played it, whether it's the AAC or whatever, you can go fast and kind of get away from that. You want to outscore people, and that's great. But we all know that in the SEC, if that defense is out there for a certain amount of plays, it all of a sudden gets weird, especially at the end. And that's something that Ole Miss, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, Trey, but I think our audience will agree too, that Ole Miss ran into that problem at the end of some of their games against the better teams, because the teams that can actually score with you and have the depth on defense to be able to get halfway through that third quarter, then all of a sudden your defense is gassed. So I'm wondering, and I've said I think they'll slow down a little bit, kind of take the foot off the gas to give those guys a break, because it's so hard as a defensive coordinator to say, man, you guys played well, but we gave up 38 points because we're out in the field the whole time. Even if you hit a big play in the third quarter quick, operating fast like that, that's fantastic. You scored, but here comes the kickoff team again. Here comes the defense. Do you think it's something that Josh Heupel is going to have to put his foot on the brake a little bit to be able to give that defense, which you guys got some players on defense. You still do. That's one thing I think Jeremy Pruitt did a pretty good job of, that he understood. One of the few things now that you're looking back on it. But do you think he's going to have to start going the speed limit a little more? Because especially if that's not hitting early, you could find yourself in a hole, and some of these teams will just say, all right, Jimbo, Texas A&M will say, all right, here comes the power. Here comes inside zone. We'll go ahead and ride this thing out to sunset.
Well, I think what Tennessee's going to have to do is they're going to figure out those first 3 games. They're going to have to try to, they play Bowling Green, Pittsburgh, and they got one more up in there. I think it was Furman. I have to go back and look at the schedule. But what they're going to have to figure out, okay, what's the right speed here? What can the defensive unit that Tim Banks is going to lead, along with his other assistant coach, Rodney Gardner, on that defensive line? So how are they going to be able to slow down the opposing team? Now, I completely agree. I go back and I look at that Ole Miss Alabama game from last year.
Yes.
If Lane would have had a defense that could have gotten 3 to 4 more stops than what they did, that could have been a different ballgame, because they were putting up points. You're starting to see how the SEC has changed so much when it comes to offense. But you look at what Josh Heupel is going to have to do here. I don't know if he slows it down per se, but you got to have a defensive unit that's 3 to 4 deep, because you got to be able, at least on the defensive line, you got to be 3D, 4 deep on the defensive line.
Do they have that at Tennessee right now, Trey? Do they have that right now?
That's tough. Defensive line has been something for Tennessee that I would say that was a slack off last year. I mean, they had the talent, Darrell Middleton, Aubrey Solomon. You look at Matthew Butler up front. I think with guys coming in, Omari Thomas, I think that right now they probably have a 2 deep. That's okay. They can go in the SEC, but they're going to have to build bodies up. And that's going to be the thing. Linebacker wise, what was the biggest thing to hurt Tennessee last year? It was inside linebacker. Henry To'oTo'o, great inside linebacker. But the problem is that every time he was lining up before a play, he was having to figure out where Jeremy Banks and Kavaris Crouch were supposed to be. So when you're having to worry about those two and you can't worry about the upcoming play, that's where you start to see things kind of slack off. Tennessee got destroyed in the passing game across the middle. It's kind of a tradition here in Tennessee to give up a 10-yard slant that turns into 30. It is what it is. So you look at what Tim Banks will have to work with, and Garner and whoever else he puts on his staff. I think gets announced in the next 2 days. I think they have weapons there to work, but the problem is Tim Banks is going to have to work with Heupel extremely hard on being able to balance what they're doing on offense compared to the defense. Because if Tennessee tries to get in the shooting match and they try to go toe-to-toe, point for point, okay, that might work out for 2.5 quarters, 3 quarters, but I promise you by the 4th quarter, Jimbo or Nick or Kirby, they're going to say, okay, we're going to pound the football now.
Exactly right.
We're going to pound the football, and we're going to beat you in the trenches. That's how we'll take care of you, and that's how we'll put you away. So I'm sure we'll get into the offense here in a minute, but I think defensively, Tim Banks has to come in, a guy that technically hasn't called a lot of plays, but kind of has, I guess.
Yeah.
You want to kind of put that. But I think with the defensive talent that he has here, it took Tennessee a couple tries for Tim Banks. He said no at first, and then they went back. But I think defensive wise, they'll be okay. But it's just going to be, you're going to be learning as you go here. And I think that all starts here in about a month of spring practice.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I do want to talk offensively about personnel, because the biggest question at Tennessee has been the quarterback position. And I think that was ultimately, and there was a few other things, the downfall of Jeremy Pruitt when you look at the way the quarterback play was, because there were some puzzle pieces, especially up front, to be able to do some things. I remember watching y'all go into Jordan-Hare Stadium, run insert right down Auburn's throat, and they couldn't stop it. Then all of a sudden, they decided to throw the ball down in the red zone, and you know what happens. So offensively, turning the page at the quarterback position. I know you brought up some names earlier. Who were some guys that you're looking to kind of take that mantle and run with it. And is somebody coming to Tennessee from where Josh Heupel really was at UCF?
I think that Tennessee right now, Jarrett Garantano is at Washington State, and I think that's the best thing for both parties. I think that Tennessee has a freshman who's already on campus, Caden Salter from Cedar Hill, Texas, broke a bunch of records in the state of Texas, state title game, all that good stuff. You bring in the transfer from Virginia Tech, Landon Hooker, who I think can run this type of offense. He's athletic, get outside the pocket. And then you don't forget a guy that's been here, and Brian Maurer.
Tough kid.
Brian Maurer is a tough kid who, a lot of people forget this, Josh Heupel recruited to UCF out of Florida. So you look at his system and what he can run. I think Brian Maurer is going to have to put on 15, 20 pounds just because I think, when he takes a hit, he usually doesn't come back in the game. But I think he has a good enough arm. I think he can get outside the pocket. I think he can run the football. So the quarterback position, I think, and we haven't even talked about Harrison Bailey yet.
Yeah.
I think the quarterback position is going to be better this year than it has been in the previous 2 to 3 years because of the type of offense you're running. Harrison Bailey was a 4-star, 5-star, whoever you follow, out of Marietta. And that the kid can throw the ball 30, 40 yards. Can he throw the ball 60 yards? No, he's got to really put a lot of effort to do that. Can he get outside the pocket and run? Yeah. But is it this type of offense? He's going to have to learn something new because at Marietta in high school, and then last year, Jim Chaney didn't run a lot of RPOs, anything like that. It was more drop back. So you look at it and everybody's thinking, okay, it's going to be Harrison Bailey. This is the Harrison Bailey show now. Well, no. I think that you look at the quarterbacks you have on the roster who can get outside the pocket, and Caden Salter and Hooker and be able to learn that system, and Brian Maurer. That's why I think Tennessee's going to be okay at quarterback. They're hoping Ty Simpson commits to them. I think it's next Friday now because of the weather. Here's my biggest thing about Tennessee and quarterbacks. Everybody always thinks the next guy is the savior for Tennessee.
Without a doubt. The backup quarterback's the most popular guy on the roster if there's any problem.
Right. And the 17-year-old who hasn't even committed yet, they think is the savior for Tennessee football. And that's been the problem over the last couple of years. It's been, last year it was, Harrison Bailey's going to come in, save Tennessee football. Now it's 2022 quarterback who won't even play it down for a year and a half. Oh, no, he's the guy. He's going to come in and he's going to say, you just never know. And that's the thing. So you have to go with what you have on the roster. And I think right now Tennessee has a good group of quarterbacks that I think they can flourish underneath Josh Heupel's system. Just going to take some time to learn.
Yeah, well, Josh, if anybody can coach a quarterback up in this type of system, it's Josh Heupel. He, pretty decent quarterback himself, won a national championship with Bob Stoops at Oklahoma. And, Trey, when I'm looking at, and we'll get off Tennessee here in a second, because I think you've nailed really every point. It's going to be, I think they're the most interesting team to watch this next year because I want to see how that offense, because again, Ole Miss goes fast. Josh Heupel goes warp speed. I can't believe NASA is not asking him questions about how to get to Mars faster and having meetings with Stephen Hawking and stuff like that. But that's a story for another day. But I want to ask, and a lot of our base and audience has been asking about Dylan Brooks, the recruit, the 4-star that signed with Tennessee. And listen, you got to play the game. Yeah, 5-star, 4-star, wherever you look, like you said. But right now, obviously, you have to wait. There's a 30-day waiting period before, other people start getting involved. Have you heard anything on that front? I keep hearing it's going to be Auburn eventually. Have you heard, I know the staff's probably reached out to him. They do get Rodney Gardner, but I say, well, Rodney Gardner was the D-line coach at Auburn when Dylan Brooks committed to Tennessee. So that argument to me really doesn't make sense.
And don't forget Cody Burns as well, who's
yes,
Auburn as well, who is now at Tennessee.
Yes.
My biggest thing is, being from down south, I know how all that works. And it's like, okay, well, if you didn't go to Auburn and you're from the state of Alabama and you didn't go to Auburn or Alabama, there's a reason why usually, and my biggest thing was Auburn never stopped recruiting him.
Yeah.
I think that, you have to remember Kevin Steele is still technically on contract in Knoxville right now.
Not only in Knoxville, Trey, and about 19 other places as well.
Exactly. Though I don't think it'll be too much longer here in Knoxville. They're going to pay him and say thank you. But I think with Dylan Brooks, I was told 2 weeks ago he had called compliance and told them, I want out. There's nothing you can do about it. I'm not here on campus. I'm asking for my release. I think that's why you saw a lot of his tweets that said free me and all that type of stuff. I have heard Auburn is the school that he would want to go to. Now, it all depends. It all depends on numbers and all depends on the new coaching staff and whatnot. But I think that it's going to be hard for Tennessee to kind of come back in that picture now.
Yeah, it's tough.
You got to remember, man, Jeremy Pruitt and this former staff, they recruited the heck out of him.
Yeah, they did.
And when you're committed to one school and then all of a sudden that whole staff leaves and, you might be familiar with two coaches that are on the staff now, but I just think that with Dylan Brooks, I think it would be best for him where he can be going somewhere that he's happy.
Yeah.
Don't go somewhere just because you're tied to, and I get it. Look, these national layers of tip, but there's a reason why they have outs in this when new coaches are hired and staffs are completely overhauled.
Yes.
This is the type of reason for that. So I think the young man should be released. If he felt like staying at Tennessee, have some conversations, great. But release him and let him go sign somewhere else. And let's not wait till freaking March or May, April, whenever, and then we get here and this kid's having to go enroll in a university later on and he misses all this time. If they don't want to be here and they have a way out that's in the NCAA rule book, let them go.
Trey, I think that's such a rational way to look at it. I wish everybody would look at it in that situation this way, as clear-headed in that perspective that you just laid out, because I agree. And real quick, I do want to throw in a word from one of our newest sponsors, eBay. If you're looking for maybe some older shoes, maybe some old Air Force Ones, the Jordans, whatever, or maybe new ones that are coming out, you've got to go to ebay.com/sneakers. They got everything. They got an authenticity guarantee, whether it's the logo, the box, everything. They even add an authenticity tag that guarantees you're getting exactly what you want. Because again, we all love new shoes. We know the great selection that eBay has. So make sure you go over to ebay.com/sneakers. Check them out and tell them Jboy sent you. But Trey, I do want to scope the SEC because you're a guy that keeps track of a lot of stuff, not just at Tennessee. And there's been new hires, and you brought it up for Josh Heupel. There wasn't going to be a lot of wiggle room in the SEC these next couple of years because there are some new hires made. We all know how solidified some guys are. You'd have to probably see some retirements for that to happen. I want to start with South Carolina. Then I want to get to Auburn. Shane Beamer, a guy that, at the end of the day hasn't been a head coach, but has basically been a guy that's been waiting, been groomed. Whether it's at Oklahoma, you look at his resume. He goes to South Carolina, where it's a tough place to win. And Clemson is hotter than Hansel at the Male Model Awards, if you've ever seen Zoolander right now. And the way Dabo's got it rolling over there. And at the end of the day, do you see it? And I'm not talking about the first couple of years, but can Shane Beamer build the type of program at South Carolina that's not going to win the SEC every year, but can get to maybe that 9-win mark, or maybe once every 4 years, that 10-win mark? Do you see him being able to do that?
My biggest thing on Shane Beamer, and it feels like a year ago when that hire was made, my biggest thing on Beamer was make sure you get a staff underneath you where you can be the CEO and you can let the defensive staff and the offensive staff do their things. And that's been the big, when I look at the staff hires, it's like, I love the Hardesty hire. I thought that was nice at the running back position at South Carolina.
Yeah.
I look at what Shane Beamer's trying to put together. I think he's a coach that, he can win 8 games here. He can win 9 games here. Maybe if Georgia and Florida are having a down year, we've seen it in the past, maybe make that run towards Atlanta where at least you're into this thing by the end of October and you're playing for something in November. I think South Carolina has the resources. I just watched a video the other day of their new facility, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And what I'm getting at, you're able to attract better recruits. I think when you look at what Shane Beamer can do as a whole, and we know his pedigree, we know where he's been, we know who his father is, we know everything that entitles and encompasses what he can bring to a college football team. But my biggest thing is you got to make sure that your coaching staff is right down the middle here, and make sure, it was the whole, remember the old Tracy Rocker thing where he left in a meeting and went to Auburn for a day, and then left Auburn and went to Philly. But it's like one of those things where you just got to have it narrowed down. And I'm not saying that was his fault. Rocker wanted out, he got out. But what I'm getting at is I think Shane Beamer can put together a staff. Yeah. In 3 to 4 years, South Carolina can be somebody you have to worry about, because I think they can go get a quarterback. I think they can get a running back. South Carolina has produced wide receiver like crazy. Maybe, besides maybe Alabama, LSU, maybe one or two more that invest in the conference. But what down the road, I think Shane Beamer needs to understand, and this is where Jeremy Pruitt messed up.
Okay.
Shane Beamer's got to understand that he can't control everything. You better figure out guys that can do it here and there, and then you be the CEO. Jeremy Pruitt lost it at Tennessee because he tried to put his hands in the cookie jar in the offensive room, and then also while trying to run the defense at the same time. And when that happens, you take your attention off everybody else and things go haywire. So if Shane Beamer can play it down the middle here, I think things can go well in Columbia. It's just going to take some time. Don't expect it to go right off Jump Street and them winning 9-10 games. But I think with the SEC Eastern Division, if you can catch Florida or Georgia off that beat one year, I think that's when you slide in and try to make a run.
Yeah, and I think Shane kind of fits that new fun term a little bit that you brought with Josh Heupel, younger guy, fresh blood in there. We all know, look, Will Muschamp is a fantastic coach, but he runs a pretty tight ship. He's obviously a very intense guy. And I'm not saying Shane's not intense, but I think it's a little bit of a different flavor of ice cream. I think he's more of a CEO. I know Auburn, and typically it's the Good Old Boy Network, or it's a hire that everybody saw coming. They go and get Bryan Harsin. Just your initial thoughts on him going to Auburn from Boise, and how you think it may play early on.
I know he made that stop in Arkansas, but talk about a culture shock going from Boise to Auburn, which, I love Auburn. Two little brothers went to Auburn. I have great friends that go there, work in the athletic department. I think that they ended up getting a really good coach. And I think this is somebody that things got stagnant in Auburn. People figured out Gus Malzahn, and that's not a bad thing. That's not a knock at Gus. People just figured it out. You got to try. You got to innovate.
You got to evolve, baby. You got to evolve.
Even when he tried to bring in Chad Morris, it was still Gus Malzahn's show. Yeah. But I think with Bryan, man, I think he brings that energy that needs. I think he brings experience that Auburn needs. Auburn did not need to go hire an OC or a DC and let this be a project for 4 to 5 years. They needed to go hire somebody that knows what he's doing, can come in immediately and try to bring you results. And I think that's what Harsin can do. I think he's put together a hell of a staff down there. I like his recruiting department that they're putting together right now. And the players that he has on the roster, and especially the ones he bring in, but the players that he has on the roster, I think you can, if you go back and watch a couple of these Boise State games. I went back and watched one where they played Nevada in previous years, and you look at that offense, and it's different than what like Heupel does, and in that up tempo. They have a balanced attack, but you're going to see a lot more downfield throws. I like the hire. I think Bryan Harsin can do good things at Auburn. I think he is going to drive Nick Saban nuts for the next couple of years when it comes to recruiting, because once he gets his foot, kind of settled in, figured out how this state's going to go. Alabama's a different state. I grew up in it. I lived there for 25 years. I'm from Mobile. Recruiting is crazy, but that's why you put together a good staff that knows these areas, knows the Gulf Coast area, that panhandle area where you can try to go in there and poach 3 to 4 players a year, 5 players a year. And then be able to, the great part about Harsin is he can go to the West Coast.
Yes.
He can go up to the Northeast, Northwest, and he can get players in there because they know him. And I think that's the key thing here, where Auburn, yes, they have gone out of the box every now and then, gone to the West Coast, gone to Texas, Oklahoma, places like that. Now you can change it up. Now you can go even further because of those relationships already built. And I think that's why it's going to help recruiting so much. And Bryan Harsin's a good hire. I'd like him. He's going to be fun for the SEC. And in the long run, I think Auburn defensively as well will take the next step too, because defensively, it kind of felt like they were running so many different kind of schemes where people were catching them at times. And I think if you can just settle down in a base and be able to look at your productivity that you have on that defensive side of the football, I think good things are coming down at Auburn. It's going to take a minute, but I think good things are coming down there at Auburn. And I really like the hire because it was so out of the box.
Yeah.
And that's why I loved it, because the boosters at Auburn didn't get their way. It makes it almost even better. It's like, okay, you wanted this guy. No. Alan Green says,
yeah,
I'm going to go get this guy. And I really think that they looked for a home run. And in my opinion, I think they got themselves a nice home run hire.
Well, Trey, you always spit fire, and if this Harsin hire works out, kind of the way we believe it will, they're going to need to give Alan Green the biggest key to the city possible, because, again, he did something that nobody really thought, especially if you followed Auburn, if you understand somebody like yourself, how out of the box it was. And you talk about defensively with Derek Mason. I'm very interested to see how he blends that 3-4 and 4-3, because, again, I always laugh. It's like, oh, we're a 4-3, oh, we're a 3-4. Listen, you have to adjust to what the offense is giving you. And nowadays, when you're playing teams that are so multiple, how do you beat multiplicity? With multiplicity, and it's always reactionary on defense. So Trey Wallace, brand new at Rocky Top Insider.
Love the Derek Mason hire, by the way.
Yeah,
I followed him in Nashville when I lived in Nashville. I was covering the whole SEC. Derek Mason, let me tell you something for Auburn fans. Derek Mason is a great guy. He's going to get out in the community. I promise you, your defense is going to be fantastic. Give him a minute to let him come in there and kind of wiggle things around. But he might not have worked out as a head coach, but I promise you he'll work out as a defensive coordinator.
Oh, and that he's getting back in his bag, the euphemism the kids say defensively. Right. And when you're able to focus on that one thing, when it's what you do best, it tends to work out well. But Trey, I know, congratulations, number one, on the new job at Rocky Top Insider, man. They got a great one. Really excited. I know our audience wants to follow you as well. Tell them where they can find you on social media and where they can read your stuff, man, because your content, regardless of what type of fan you are, but if you're a Tennessee fan, this is the guy to follow. Trust Jboy here. This is the guy to follow. Trey, tell them where they can find you.
Thanks. No doubt, man. I really appreciate it. Twitter is at Trey Wallace _ WALLACE. And then at Rocky Top Insider, covering Tennessee daily. We've got basketball. We've got spring football coming up in a month. Baseball, which I love, college baseball. A lot of great things coming. This is my second day on the job, so we're jumping right in, and I'm excited. I couldn't be more thrilled to be a part of this team, and great things are coming. You're doing awesome. Proud of you as usual. I appreciate that, Trey. Keep balling, man, and I look forward to doing this down the road.
Hey, awesome. Hey, we're going to talk some hoops next time I get you on here, especially with March Madness coming. And I know Tennessee fans are ready to get it rolling. Rick Barnes, I know they took an L at LSU, but he's a fantastic coach and recruiter, man. But I do really appreciate it, Trey. Everybody go give him a follow. Check him out on Rocky Top Insider. And I want to thank you guys for checking us out as usual. Like I said, whether you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are. But whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, Vimeo, watching us, it doesn't matter. We appreciate you guys, because without you, there is no us. Merchandise, get ready. It's been another edition of the Jboy Show. Jboy's going, gone. The Jboy Show is produced by David Cohn, technical director Dave Hammock, creative director David Culbertson, audio engineer Faison, production assistant Kyle Orr, and our executive producers Jake Crane, Vince Thompson, and of course we film at Melt Sports in Atlanta, GA. So come check us out.